Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. Hello, Ignite Intimacy community. This is Miss Laura Aisha, and I am super grateful today. Some of you may know that I launched into a project recently with a passion to bring women of color and white women together to talk about racism and white privilege and just the things that we are generally not talking about together. And so we had our first event last night, and it was awesome. Standing room only, a beautifully diverse mix. I mean, it was so wonderful, the different women who came out and some men, and it was just amazing. We had a powerful conversation. We had the beginnings of a conversation over about an hour and a half, and it was just super, super blessed. So just kind of riding on a high from that right now, in addition to some other really magical, amazing, mystical things I experienced last weekend up in the Catskills. And so, yeah, just giving so much thanks to my co-creators, Minda and Karen and Nazreen Haj. She's from the Creators Collective, and it was just so amazing. So we are continuing the conversation. This one is focused on women. However, it is definitely for all people, no matter what your gender identity is. And because there's like golden nuggets in it for all of us, right? Whether we want to be more intentional about how we're showing up in our sexual and intimate romantic relationships, or we want to find ways to communicate better with the people that we're engaging with so that we can have more of what we truly desire. So I am really excited to have Kim Sedgwick on the line from Toronto. What's going on, Kim?
Oh, I'm just so thrilled to be here today. I know we get to talk about many of my favorite topics, so I'm very excited.
I know. Well, and it was so cool because I came across you online. I was doing some research and, just exploring different people that I could feature on the podcast. And I found you and your sister. And first of all, I'm a twin. So like, I love the sister thing. Anyways, that's like, I was like, oh, cool. Sisters working together and like around the topics of sex and sexuality, which is something that my twin sister and I have talked about doing before. And so it was just like, okay, I need to reach out to these ladies and see like what's going on. And, so we'll get into like how you two came together in, a business that was, focused on both, babies, child rearing and all of that. And then also sex toys and lube and things like that. So Kim, you have a really, fun background as far as like when you started getting into, or curious about sex and sexuality. So give us some nuggets from the early days. Like what were your first kind of inspirations and motivations?
For sure. So I grew up in a very sex positive household where we were just really encouraged to ask questions from a young age. I remember my mom giving me a copy of Our Bodies, Ourselves, which I actually have her copy from the 1970s.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And so, that gives you some sense of just the kind of household I grew up in. And I was reading Dan Savage and watching the Sunday Night Sex Show and just really interested in this from, I don't even remember a time when I wasn't. So that tells you how long this has been going on. And I distinctly remember a dinner conversation. So in our household, dinner was a long affair. If you came over for dinner, you had to be prepared for like a 3 or 4 hour dinner conversation.
Nice.
And, yeah. My friends were always like, I don't know if I'm always up for that, because in addition to it being long, the conversation would often include topics that I don't think my friends were necessarily discussing at the dinner table. So one of my favorites was, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I'd been reading some book that I probably had borrowed from one of my older sisters, and it mentioned a blowjob. So I was like, Mom, what's a blowjob? And just a look on her face of like, all right, I've said that I'm going to answer questions and never shame my kids for asking, and yet there's like 15 people over for dinner. So that's just, that gives you a little glimpse into my life growing up. And I think because not only do I have my older sister, who I eventually went into business with, but I also am blessed to have two other stepsisters, who are older than me. So I was the youngest of all of them, and grew up just hearing them come back from dates and talking about, kissing boys and all this sort of thing. And so I think I was just really fortunate to have their wisdom. And then, as I mentioned, have access to things like Our Bodies, Ourselves and these TV shows. And, this is pre-internet, right? Like I didn't have access to this information in the way that folks do now. And so I think that also because of that, my friends started to recognize that I did know more than them because I had all this information. And so they would come to me and go, Kim, I have this question about, sexuality. And they knew that if I didn't know the answer, that I could go home and ask one of my sisters or ask my mom or reference one of the books I had. So I became sort of a go-to sexpert long before that's what I chose to do as a career. So I often say that this sort of career chose me. I don't really feel like there was any other path that I could have taken.
That's cool. I love that. I mean, it's very, unique. I just want to make sure, are you picking up any echo, or is it sounding okay on your end?
It sounds okay on my end.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So yes, I love this because I too was very interested in sex and sexuality from a young age. And but I grew up in a very I wouldn't call it sex negative environment, but it was heavily, my environment was heavily dominated by, Catholicism, and the extent to our conversations about sex were that you don't have sex before you're married. And that was pretty much it. And I remember one time, I don't remember how old I was. I was in my early teens, and my brother was eavesdropping on a phone conversation that I was having with someone. And I was talking about blowjobs. And my brother totally ratted on me to my mom. And my mom was horrified. And she just could not even fathom, like, do you do what? Like, what is that? I mean, she didn't even know what it was.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's like, and I'm just thinking about that right now. I'm just like, wow. Okay. Anyways, I have a special relationship to blowjobs. So like, I can't imagine like not, ever even like, anyways, knowing or going there or thinking that it's like gross or that it's something to feel bad or shameful about. So yeah, I grew up in kind of like the opposite environment, but I had a friend across the street whose mom was like gorgeous, redhead, owned a modeling agency, just like the hippest woman on the block, like amazing dresser. And she had this hot, young Argentinian soccer player boyfriend. And so we learned a bit from her. And then we had another friend when we were about 13 who we learned more from. And by that time I was already like experimenting with different things. So I was like, started experimenting fairly young. I'd say like 12 on. And in other ways before that. So that's cool. And even like, I think of, my daughter who just was so intrigued by puberty when she was younger. And like, I got her a couple of books, and man, she read through those books so fast. Like, and for me, it was such a different experience. I felt so shameful about my body changing. So So yeah, it's amazing the different experiences that we have. So through your teens and into your late teens and early 20s, what was the evolution like to where you actually went into a program where you could, dive more deeply into all of this?
I ended up going to university, planning to do an English degree. And then I took an intro to women's studies. And I remember walking in the door, and within 5 minutes, I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. So I ended up switching majors. And then a lot of my instructors would order their books from a store called Venus Envy, which I just think is the most fantastic name for a store.
Nice.
And Venus Envy was a sexuality shop that also carried books. So I would go in there to buy my course books. And in the back half of the store, I'd be like, ooh, there's some more fun things back there, all the vibrators and, lubricants and all that good stuff. And I just really loved how they combine those two things, in that it really set the stage for folks to come in and feel really comfortable around, the books and that, and then sort of slowly move in. So I almost felt like the actual physicality of the store echoed the experience of delving deeper. And I thought that was so beautiful, the way that they did that. And, over the course of my degree, got more interested in sexuality. And when I came back to Toronto, because I did my degree in a place in Canada called Halifax. And when I came back to Toronto, I noticed there were a couple shops here who were already doing that kind of work. There's a fantastic store called Come As You Are and another one called Good For Her. But they were both in the West End of Toronto, and I live in the East End. And there's something about the way that Venus Envy had been set up, that I really loved. And so I was living with my sister at the time, because unfortunately there's not a high demand for women's studies graduates. So they were knocking on my door with job offers. So I was working, a variety of retail jobs and trying to figure out what my next step was. And at that same time, I had just gone to a women's studies conference as part of my degree and learned about the Justisse Method of fertility management. So that's all about how to track your cycle for a variety of reasons. Either you can use it as natural birth control, you can use it if you're trying to get pregnant, or you can use it for what we call body literacy. So just better understanding your body. And so I had gone to this conference and learned more about it, and brought the information to my sister, who had just given birth to her daughter and was trying to figure out what to do with birth control, because she had been on the pill prior to having her daughter. And then afterwards, she had tried to take the pill, and it actually increased her milk supply so much that her daughter was literally choking at the breast because the milk was coming out so fast.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a side effect they don't talk about, and no one could figure out what was going on, because she had been breastfeeding perfectly fine before that, like latching, everything was great. And then this had started to happen, and she was like, what's going on? And then the penny dropped that this problem had started at the same time that she had started taking the pill. And so she was looking for another form of birth control, and I told her about this Justisse Method, and she just got so passionate about it, because she's like, why does no one else talk about this? Why is it, lumped in with the rhythm method, which is not effective? We always joke that's actually how my sister was conceived, was my mom was using the rhythm method. So you can tell how well that works.
Yeah.
So Justisse is very different than the rhythm method. And so anyway, she was really passionate about this. I was so passionate about sexuality, and we're like, well, these things all have to do with this, core concept of body literacy, better understanding your body, being more connected. And I'd always dreamed of having a storefront. I'd always worked retail. We were both passionate about books. Our father is in publishing, so we both had always dreamed of having a bookstore. And we were up late one night and kind of looked at each other. We're like, this all fits together. And we've always loved working together. We are so close, and work so well together that we decided to come together and open Red 10 Sisters. And I always think it's amazing that from the day we came up with the idea to the day we opened was exactly 9 months. And it feels like very fitting. It feels like we gave birth to this business. And we've been doing it for we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So we've been doing that for 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Well, and so when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, we talked about communication, especially in the bedroom and with regards to sexuality. And this is a topic that comes up a lot. Actually, the episode that aired this week with Rano and Sierra, part 2, it's a lot about communication. And I know for myself, I have definitely been challenged in this area, even though I am like a super communicator. There are ways that I get stopped up, and I don't want to turn someone off. I don't want to lose something. I don't want to risk losing something. I don't want to sound stupid. All of these things. And so one of the things that we discussed is just like really focusing on that piece. Like, why aren't women, and we're focusing on women so today, but really this can apply to anybody, right?
For sure, of course. Yeah,
So
no, it can apply to all folks.
Yeah. So for all people, it's like, why are we not asking for what we want? Like, why are we, first of all, laying there hoping, praying, assuming like, oh, if you would just do this, oh, that would feel so good, but not saying anything.
Yeah. And this is really at the heart of the work that I do. So my work has evolved to the point where right now, what I mostly spend my days doing is coaching people. So I work one-on-one with people and generally with women. And yeah, this is the number one thing they come to me with, is that they're not asking for what they want. And I think there are many different reasons why that's the case. But one of the ones that comes up the most often is that they don't feel like they deserve it. They are so used to putting other people first, especially moms, like they're so trained to be always thinking about other people that they're either not taking the time to think about what they want, or if they're taking the time, that they don't feel like they deserve to ask for it. And there's something about really claiming that you deserve to have your needs met and then asking for them to be met. And that I, as I said, I think that's sort of at the heart of all of the work that I do, is just this taking up more space, being able to claim that you deserve to be taking up that space, and you deserve to be asking for it. And I think that sort of, we talk about how you show up in the bedroom is how you show up in the rest of life. And a lot of my clients are women who, in the workforce as well, they're not getting the promotion. They're not living up to their full potential because they're not even putting up their hand to say, I know the answer to this. Right. And I feel like there's a lot of similarities there of just not wanting to take that risk for fear of being shot down and not listened to. And so that it's easier to play it safe and to stay small than it is to take up space. And they often say that feels easier. And then really, when we delve deeper, it's like, how much are you sacrificing to stay in that small place?
Yep. Yeah. So how much are we sacrificing? I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, you're sacrificing being fully seen, like actually getting to have someone know you, because if you're holding back what it is that you want, then they're not seeing all of you. And that's inhibiting true connection.
And intimacy.
And intimacy, exactly. And, that is one of the most beautiful things, is when you are fully seen for all of you. And to me, like, I'm getting choked up thinking about this, because the moments that I've had that with a partner where I've been willing to risk saying, like, this is actually what I need, and this is what I want from you, and this is what I feel like I deserve, and to then have that recognized and truly seen is the most beautiful experience to have all of that, because it happens so rarely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had some experiences with men where I have felt just so fully seen. And I actually, I mean, I had an experience this week with a man that wasn't sexual at all, but it was, it could have gone that way. And I wasn't in the space for it. And I just was honest about that, and the text at the end of the night was like, you were so beautiful in every way. And I was just like, wow, I was not expecting that. I felt bad. I was like, just all the like, but should I, just all those old thoughts that come up, those like automatic thoughts and really under the foundation of just like wanting to be loved and liked and embraced and in air quotes, safe.
Yeah.
Right. So like, and I mean, safety, all of this work we do as humans to try to stay safe it's like an illusion, right? Like like safe from what? You know what I mean? Like how much of that is just like a construct in our mind, and then how much of it is real? So, so there's a lot of energy created around staying safe, and then it cuts us off from the flow of goodness and beauty that is here for us to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up so many wonderful points there. And where my mind went when you were talking about this safety is I often hear from clients, and I certainly experienced this as well, is the fear of rejection of like, what if we ask for something and then our partner doesn't want to give it to us, or, tells us we're not normal? That's the other huge thread in my work, is people are afraid that there's something wrong with them. The question of like, they'll ask something and it almost inevitably ends in, is that normal? Is always the sort of follow-up of like, that's the fear, is that there's something wrong with us, right? That we're not going to fit in. And my question to myself and now and to my clients now is, do you want to be with someone who's not going to give you what you want, right? So it's like the fear is that they're not going to do that. And it's like, well, then the next question is, well, then right? Like, do you really want to be with someone who's not going to accept you for all of who you are?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, what fun is that? Geez, it's like, the dream for me is like to be fully expressed and to be fully embraced by myself and by the people that I choose to have around me. And I, with someone else this week, I got very clear about something. I received an invitation from someone, in regards to a trip that I'm going on, and it just didn't feel good. It was like, it wasn't the type of invitation I want to receive. And so I took some space and I responded accordingly. And, it was just like, I just the way it was presented, it's a no for me. And I said, would you be open to hearing what would be a yes for me? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And so it gave me space to express that and to just be really clear about what I'm willing to accept in my relating with men and what I'm not, and I'm certainly no longer interested or willing to be anybody's like fuck toy.
Yeah. And I'm hearing like a thread there of boundaries, of being like, this is what I'm willing to accept. And I actually have for a long time had this book in mind. I mentioned that our father's in publishing. So I've been bouncing this idea around for a long time of this concept of the nice girl. Like I grew up always being praised for being nice. Like it was always like, oh, Kim is so nice. And the more I reflect on what that means is I actually equate that kind of nice, I'm using nice in air quotes here, is really passive, right? I would allow other people to always come first. And I was always trying to cater to what I thought they wanted me to be. And so that then led to me not speaking up about what I wanted, because I was like, well, if I'm asking for what I want, then I'm going to be seen as, too dominant and too demanding, and all of these negative words that we often ascribe to women, right, when they actually speak up for themselves. And so I am so passionate about redefining what this nice identity is, and really focusing more on boundaries. And the irony is that at least for me, the fear was that I wouldn't be liked if I started to be more authentic and more myself, because then I would have these boundaries and say, like, I'm not willing to accept certain things. And what's fascinating is I feel like I'm now a more, like there's a magnetism to that kind of confidence that comes from having those boundaries, right? And so I have much deeper connections with people. I'd much rather have those deep connections with fewer people. And there's some people that are not going to resonate with who I am. And frankly, I don't have time for that anymore. Like I just live to then be focusing on my energy there.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like you get to a point in your life where you just realize that there are more men coming. It's like, like when I was younger, oh my God, it was like in my 20s, like I used to think like, one, and then like, oh man, like super bummed, and like, yeah, maybe super bummed and grieving like the end of that particular connection. And then like, but there's like a long line, right? And I mean, in my experience, right? So I have a different experience than some people. Like some people are with their soulmate and they will spend the rest of their lives with that person. And some people are polyamorous, and some people will have 4 great long-term relationships in their life. I have mostly been single for my adult life. And so I, like there's a line, and I look forward to having some longer, amazing relationships with men, whether it's one man or, a handful of men over the course of time. I'm not sure. I have no idea what it's going to be, but, it's like, it's just because, like when you let the one go that's not meeting you where you need to be met, then it's like, it's just like, okay, you're out. Okay. Step out of the line. Okay. Next, like come to the front, cause like there's always opportunities there, right? Like, especially in the world we live in now with social media and, all these dating apps and all of this other stuff. And just, yeah, it's just, it's a different world that we're living in today.
It sure is. And I've been dating, cause I'm currently single, and have dated for a long time. And especially as you mentioned with these dating apps, what's funny for me is through my coaching, I've got very clear on my values and what I'm looking for in a partner. And again, my boundaries and what I'm willing to put up with. And it's so different dating now than it was a few years ago before I started this coaching program, because I'll go on a date and I know pretty much instantly. It's like, okay, you are not lining up with some of my core values. Like there's just no point in us continuing to date. And it's just so liberating to have that kind of clarity. Right away, it's like, okay, if we don't meet these same basic core values, then there's just no point. And it was funny that I recently went on a date with someone who I dated a while ago, and about halfway through the date, he said, something about you is really different. Like you're a lot feistier than I remember.
Yeah.
And what was funny is he found it more attractive, right? Of course, in the past, I would have been fearful of the fact that I wasn't putting up with stuff. Like he would say things I didn't agree with, and I would call him on it and say, I think that's, but what was so funny is it was actually the story in my head was, if I am more myself and I don't put up with things, then I'll be less liked. And then, of course, the reality is quite the reverse, is that he had so much more respect for me because I was standing up for myself and because I was challenging him. So it was a great reminder for me of, the value of this work, and also the value of rewriting the stories. Like how often we have created these whole narratives of how we think things are going to go that limits possibility, because we think we know the outcome rather than allowing it to evolve organically.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it's like when you think, you're going to say something to your lover, or your boss, or whoever, and it's like, you think, oh man, I'm going to get fired, or like, and then you say it, and all of a sudden it creates this new opening.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, what is possible now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think another amazing example of that is getting back to this whole asking for what you want and communicating piece is I used to run in-person workshops. And I would run, there was one, they were for heterosexual couples. So there was one for women and one for men. And when I did the ones for men, the number one thing that I heard from them is like, I wish that my partner would tell me what she wants. Like, give me explicit direction, because I want to increase her pleasure. Like I want to be doing more, but I don't even know where to start. Right. And the women were all just like, oh, I'm scared to give, direction because I don't want to make him think he's doing a bad job or to sound too bossy or all of these things. So again, just these stories that the women had created that were limiting the possibility for them to speak up, when in reality, their partners were all dying for it. Like they wanted more information, right? So it was so interesting for me to see, because often I'd run these workshops, back to back, and it was just like such a strong connection. It was like, oh, if you could just be a fly on the wall here. So what was nice is I got to go back to the other group and be like, hey, women, you remember how you were telling me you're scared to give, feedback? They're all dying for it.
Yeah.
Right? They all want to know.
Yeah. That's brilliant. I love that. It's like, and another thing that came up, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, with a lover friend of mine was, like, it was like, just all of a sudden there were some things that were bothering him and he wasn't talking to me about it. And then like, you know, I just kind of like did a little poking and was like, what's going on, you know? And then he really opened up about some stuff and it created like this, space and then more closeness. Like I felt more related to him. I was just like, wow, like this man is like, he's telling me he feels safe enough sharing with me some concerns that are on his mind and in his heart. And it allowed us to just go a bit deeper with each other. And I could just feel the whole energy shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It's pretty special. Yeah.
That is. And one of the things that I often work with my clients to do is to actually set up sort of regular dates to talk about things. Because one of the challenges that I think happens is that you go so long without bringing something up. Like you mentioned, you know, you kind of sense something was up with this partner and, but they're not talking about it. Right. And I feel like if you have these sort of regular check-ins, then you don't let things fester for so long. And for me, the other thing that comes up with these dates is that then you're in the same headspace, because what often I think happens with the communication piece is if something's bothering you, you don't necessarily want to bring it up when you're on this, you know, lovely romantic date and the expectation is that it's going to be all sort of light and fun and flirty. You don't want to bring up this heaviness, right? And so having these dates where you're on the same page about this is the time to bring up these topics, that then you're both going in with the same expectation. Because that's one of the biggest things I see with clients is like these mismatched expectations about what certain dates are going to look like or any night for that matter. And so if you're on the same page, and then, as I said, the regularity I think is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I know some other folks who actually, you know, actively do that in their relationship, and it creates so much more closeness. And it's just like, look, we're in relationship with each other. Shit is going to come up. Like there is going to be stuff that we need to work out, that we need to discuss. And so just creating that space, just like, yeah, like, and then how can you make a game out of it even, you know? And like, and I featured a couple on the podcast a while back. I'm going to see if I can just find which episode it was exactly, but Gabrielle and Raj featured them a while back, and they have this whole business that's created around teaching couples how to create fun games. Yeah, it's episode 28, Proactive, Playful, and Positive Relationships with Gabby and Raj Sundra. And we go into, you know, some of these games that they play with each other, which allows them to get to the heart of the matter, but also to like have some fun with it. Right. So like if one of them's getting like into their like way too serious or cranky mode, like the other one will do like this little dance and like they have a song. And then this song and making it kind of silly can just like shake up the energy and allow for space and connection. And then it can allow for whoever's feeling cranky to kind of like move through that instead of staying stuck in it.
I'm smiling because my sister and I actually created what we call our failure dance.
Nice.
So we actually have a little dance that we do every time we fail. And what I love is, I mean, Amy and I grew up dancing. So for us, that always shakes up the energy in music as well. And part of what made me think about the failure part in this context is I think that's another piece of this communication is that we're so scared of doing things wrong, right? And we have this whole story about what it means to be quote unquote wrong. And what I love about coaching is one of the tenets of coaching is fail forward, that you actually learn more by failing than you do by success, right? And when it comes to sexuality, like I often say, there's really nothing, you know, obviously there's, you know, practices that need to be done with certain kinds of knowledge and safety in mind. But generally speaking, you do something quote unquote wrong and, you know, you decide you don't like it, you don't do it again. But then maybe you discover from that particular kind of play, like, oh, I didn't like that, but maybe if we did it in this slightly different way with a little less pressure, a little to the left or whatever, you're gathering information. And I would love to just switch this story around that we have around sexuality, that you're supposed to just magically know how to do it, right?
Yeah,
that we're supposed to magically be great in bed.
Yeah.
And, the sex education that I received certainly didn't ever mention pleasure. Like, we were never taught how to give an awesome blowjob. Like, that was not part of my core curriculum in grade 6 sex ed class, right? So the fact that we expect ourselves to be, experts without any kind of information is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love being in this line of work and doing sex education, is that I think it's a skill like anything else. You get better through practice and through failing and through making mistakes and then learning from them.
That's right.
And so just reframing that whole failure piece, which is why, and I've actually done the failure dance in bed, being like, wow, that did not go as planned. And then celebrating it, that at least I tried, right?
Totally. Well, and so this creates so much space to the experimentation process as well, and like when you take all the shame and blame out of it, and it's just like, oh, this doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong or you're not, good enough or doing it right. But it's like, there's so much we can learn by educating ourselves. And there are so many great videos and people online that are, teaching about these things. Like, you can go online and, learn how to do any number of things that you want. You want to learn how to give a better blowjob? Go search it on YouTube. You want to learn how to give a better hand job? Go search it on YouTube. You want to give your partner a G-spot massage? Go search it on YouTube. Like, I mean, literally, it's like you want to learn how to be the incredible lover that you've always wanted to be, then like there's so much available. And then what about just like creating the space and just saying, like, start with your intention. So Rano and Sierra really, really plugged that piece of it. It's like, set the intention and then experiment, so you set the intention, you create that safe space, and then you have space and room to experiment with different things. And some things are going to work and some things aren't. And who knows, you could, like Rano and Sierra shared on the episode that aired this week, they shared that, their sex life started to get a little flat. And they came up with this thing called Epic Saturday Nights. And you have to check the episode 44 to hear more about it. But they created Epic Saturday Nights, and it's them just going in on all these different ways to connect and engage with each other. And it's brilliant. So there's a lot of room here for some juicy, fun exploration. So before we kind of start wrapping up here, I'm just curious, what is this thing about hetero women orgasming less than men?
So what I have learned through my, I'm now 10 years working in this field. And so having talked to, at this point, probably thousands of women and attending a lot of workshops and reading a lot of books around this, is that for most women, they need some kind of clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. The estimates and the research varies, but they suggest it's around 70% of women. And so women who are engaging in heterosexual sex, generally speaking, we equate that with penetration, right? It's penis and vagina sex. And that, generally speaking, doesn't stimulate the clitoris. So there are tons and tons of women who are having sex that's not leading to orgasm.
Yeah.
And I also was having an interesting conversation this week with someone about this idea of it being so goal oriented. And they were actually challenging me and saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be so worried about this orgasm gap. Like, it's not just all about the orgasm. And I guess for me, the bigger context within that is that we just have this very narrow definition of what sex is, and especially folks who are engaging in heterosexual sex, right? That it's really focused on the man. And, the number of times when I hear women talk about sex, and really it's defined as, did he come? Like, if he orgasmed, then it was sex, right? And if he was enjoying himself. So for me, it's it's about the orgasm, but it's more just about this idea that it's such a limited definition of what sex is, and that unfortunately that default is something that really prioritizes the male pleasure over a female pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I was shocked, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Well, I guess through the last maybe 10 or 12 years, first, learning that there were grown women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, that never masturbated, like never self-pleasured. And I was just like, wow, that is so interesting. And then meeting women who've never, ever orgasmed with sex or otherwise. And I was just floored. I didn't even know I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, I can't even, like, it was like shocking to me. Right. And, so yeah, I mean, you had mentioned a book about this.
Yeah, so there's a book that actually came out recently called The Orgasm Gap that's exploring all of this topic. And so, yeah, certainly I'd suggest that folks reach out and get that book. And really, as I said, for me, it's just this broader conversation around what constitutes sex. Like I hear from clients of mine, they're like, oh yeah, I haven't had sex in a while. And then we delve deeper and it's like, well, they've masturbated or they've had oral sex or manual stimulation. Like, this is all sex, right?
Yeah.
But we focus so much on penetration, and that becomes the default. And what I love is I have a lot of my career friends talk about how the conversation for them with a new partner starts with, what are you into? Because there isn't that default, right? It's not assumed that you're going to engage in a particular kind of sex.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And what I love is to take that same vocabulary. And I actually had a partner recently, and on our, the first time that we had sex, he was like, so what are you into? And I was like, okay, I'm so in love with you in this particular moment, because you just said like the magic words to me, which is that you're not making assumptions. Like, you're not assuming what's going to happen. You're not making assumptions about what I'm into. And it was also like, what are you into and what brings you pleasure? Again, not just what makes you orgasm, because I can also orgasm very quickly, with a vibrator, and I love that, but that's not necessarily the only thing that's important to me. There's lots of other things that provide incredible pleasure that don't necessarily lead to orgasm, and to not always prioritize together. So that's again why I think there's a lot of nuance to this conversation. It isn't about this goal-oriented sexuality experience. It's really about how do we increase pleasure, and orgasm is a part of that, but it's really about how do we increase pleasure. And tied to that, you're going to have to communicate. You're going to actually have to have a conversation, because if you're not making assumptions about what the person wants, then you're going to actually have to ask them, and then they're going to have to give you an answer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, pleasure comes in so many different ways, and it does not have to mean orgasm or finishing or whatever. It's like, what if you just played, and like, imagine the pressure that's released when you are just like playing for fun. And you need time and space for that. Yeah. Right. And it's also absolutely in the realm of possibility. For me, I engage mostly with men, but, like, I've had experiences with men where it was like, I didn't even so much as like touch them over their clothes. And it was just all about them pleasuring me. And that is a dynamic experience. And it just totally flips the script. It just totally flips the script on what I grew up with, the beliefs that I had, the experiences that I had. And I was like, yeah, I want more of this, like, more men that like, want to pleasure me. Yes. That I want to pleasure me. But, well, Kim, this has been amazing. I'm wondering if there are any other books. I know you mentioned the orgasm book, the Orgasm Gap. Are any other resources that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah. So one of my other go-to books that I recommend to everyone is a book called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. And she also has a fantastic TED Talk, and it's really focused on the science. So it does talk a lot about this orgasm gap and the ways that we experience pleasure. But I just think it beautifully combines the science with also being light and fun. It's a really nice balance. And it talks a lot about the dual response and different kinds of sexuality in terms of, how we experience pleasure. And again, just really understanding why we feel the way we do and not sort of pathologizing it and not thinking that there's any idea that there's any concept of normal. Like there is no normal. She kind of throws that whole idea out the window. So anyway, I could go on and on about that book. As you can, I absolutely love it. So Come As You Are, one of my absolute favorite books. And then I can't not mention She Comes First by Ian Kerner, which is the book that actually got me started on all of this stuff around the orgasm gap and the prioritizing of intercourse. So that book it's been around for quite a while now. It's written over 10 years ago, but still I think is such a wonderful concept around prioritizing what he says is like foreplay should really be core play. Like, so this idea that the things that you do before the main event, right? Because we always are talking about sex again as intercourse. So prioritizing those other kinds of pleasures. So those are two of my absolute favorites.
I love that. Well, okay. So Kim, how can people find you online?
So everything is on our website, which is just redtentsisters.com. And then we're also on Facebook and Instagram as @redtentsisters.
Sweet. Okay, great. So redtentsisters.com and find them also on Facebook, Instagram, Red Tent Sisters. And Kim, what a pleasure to jam with you on these topics today. Very, very important conversation. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Well, Ignite Intimacy community, you heard it here. Kim Sedgwick and I, Red Tent Sisters, jamming on communication and pleasure and that sex is more than just intercourse. There is so much goodness in this conversation. So thank you so much for tuning in. Share it with your friends and email us at hello@igniteintimacy.com with any questions or comments. And please also hop over to iTunes. Leave us a rating and a review. That helps to bump us up in their system so that more people can actually hear these important conversations. This is Ignite Intimacy, Miss Laura Aisha signing off for now. So stay blessed and ciao. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey. And this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.